let's look at the features that we identified in this example and look at how they are grouped within teams, and also look at the category within each team, as well as the engineering input, which is an effort, difficulty, and confidence. So as you can see here, the first one is allow candidates to select from available slots. It's a candidate experience. So the first 4 features you see here are grouped into the theme candidate experience, and within that candidate experience theme, you see there are 2 features that are customer input, 1 feature that is competition parity, and 1 feature that is related to game-changing innovation. So that's where you get your mix within the theme itself. Same applies with recruiter experience. You have 2 that have competition priority, 1 that is innovation, and there is 1 that has a customer input. And with platform architecture, the same thing. You have a customer input for allowing API access, but you also have 2 innovation features that allows you to actually leapfrog the market through automated scheduling as well as real-time calendar and room availability. Again, you go through the exercise of looking at what is the effort, what is the difficulty, and how confident the teams are. And this gives you a good feel for how the next step, which is how do you go about actually creating your release plan. And so we'll talk more about the release plan in this slide, where um, you want to come up with a roadmap which has a thematic release plan, where your release 1 is taking into account everything that is needed for a candidate experience. Release 2 is targeting the recruiter experience, and release 3 is targeting the platform architecture. The thing to remember here, and the reason you want to group them in different themes, is you want to deliver, even if you're not meeting the needs of all of your customers, you want to deliver a full viable set of capabilities that is part of that team. To even if it is to a small set of customers, you want to deliver 100% features, rather than you delivering 50% features to 100% of your customers. Look at how you can actually deliver a full solution, a full viable solution, even if it is to a small population. So keep that in mind as you're coming up with your themes and defining your releases. Um, so for each release, so in this case, we have candidate experience as release 1, recruiter experience release 2, and platform architecture release 3. Before each release, you want to, for each release, you would have different sprints that you would go through, right? So you're not going to be building everything within the candidate experience in one go or in one sprint. So you'll break this up into multiple sprints. But before the start of each sprint, you want to make sure that what for that particular theme, there has been detailed grooming and effort and resource estimation complete. So at the high level, when you went through identifying working with engineering and identifying the effort estimate and the complexity as well as confidence level, it was really high level. You didn't have a lot of details then, and that's fine for that phase. But as you get to a point where you actually have to get these into sprints, you have to be able to get into the details and actually get in nitty-gritties of how much is the effort, what are the types of resources do we need, and how long is it going to take. You have to have that information before you can actually slot these things into sprints. The second thing is, during this process, you want to involve and take input from your UX team, your development team, QE, and you want to take input from architects as well, so that it's a well-informed grooming exercise, so that you're not leaving any portions as you're not making assumptions for things like UX, for example, or you're not making assumptions for architecture. You want to make sure that you're bringing in everybody and getting their input. The next is, for any sprint that is not sprint 1, obviously, you want to actually review completed work in the prior sprint with your business stakeholders. What this gives you is the ability to understand from your business stakeholders whether what you're working on is actually meeting the needs. It's probably not possible for you to actually go do a sprint review with customers because that's just too onerous, and you would not be able to find customers to give you feedback every 2 weeks, but there are proxies for customers like your CX team or the customer experience team or your sales team in some cases, who you can bring on to your sprint planning, your sprint review sessions, and show them what you have worked on, and get their feedback. Their feedback is important at the end of every sprint, because it gives you the ability to pivot. If you get some feedback that is that you have not thought through during the definition phase, you can actually take that feedback and incorporate that along with other items in your next sprint or the sprint after. So it gives you the ability to capture feedback along the way rather than waiting for everything to be complete and get the feedback in the end. And you also, just like how you would reprioritize your backlog based on input from a certain sprint, you also want to be able to pivot and reprioritize based on changing business needs. So if there is something that's important for the company, or if there is like for example, right now we are going through COVID, and at the start of COVID, if there are some things that you have to change in your product strategy, you should be able to do that during the sprint planning process, and change your sprint priorities based on the changing business needs. So once you have gone through the process of grooming and making sure you have received inputs from the different stakeholders, as well as the teams that are responsible for actually building the capabilities, you can now start to look at how do you translate a release plan into a sprint plan. So release one, for example, was candidate experience. So in this case, you will see we have 4 sprints identified to complete release one. And you can see that in sprint one, there is this feature called integration to Outlook / Exchange and Google Calendar that was really priority number 2 in our list based on all the exercise that we did. But the effort estimate that the engineering team came up with was low enough that it could actually be slotted within a sprint. So that is something that you can actually complete within a sprint. So you want to include that in your sprint plan for sprint one. And you can see the second feature, allow candidates to select from available slots, was number 1 on the list, but it's listed as the second item in sprint one, because the effort estimate for that particular feature is higher. So even though you want to start and get part of that feature developed in sprint one, you are also slotting that for sprint 2, because it's going to overflow for you to complete that particular feature. And so it takes 2 sprints for the allow candidates to select from available slots. There is you can always argue that you want to finish your feature within a sprint, but a lot of times that is you want to be pragmatic about that as well. So while you might be able to finish, let's say for allow candidates to select from available slots, you might be able to finish the backend components in sprint one. You might be looking at building the UX in sprint two. Or there are some cases where your development might be complete in one sprint, but you don't have enough time to finish the testing. So you might want to slot the testing in sprint two. So it's a little bit of an art to figure out how you slot these features into sprint, but you should take into account the inputs that you have received in the past as it relates to the effort estimate complexity, as well as how difficult it is to build that particular feature. So as you can see here, for the candidate experience, we have slotted the 4 features that we had identified for the candidate experience in release 1 into 4 different sprints. And the last sprint, you also want to make sure that you are setting capacity aside for integration testing, as well as what we call as hardening of the feature. So you want to make sure that the feature is fully tested. It does not have any regression. It actually works with other features that are already out in the product. And so you want to make sure that the integration is completely tested. And then you also want to make sure that all the different issues and the bugs that were identified during the entire release process are prioritized, and the high priority issues and bugs are actually fixed as part of the hardening exercise. And that's when your feature list is complete for that particular release. I want to emphasize the fact, emphasize that the feature list is complete. That does not mean you're actually ready to put this out there or deploy to the customer. There are other activities that have to happen for each release, such as documentation, communication with your customers, your internal stakeholders, making sure that you have um, the release features documented, and you are doing, if there is marketing required, for example, if it's a big feature you are introducing and you want to make the market aware that you are introducing this for your product, you want to work with marketing to make that enabled as well before you actually make it available to the customer. So there's a lot more to then finishing the features development and testing, but this is how you would go about actually prioritizing your roadmap to your release, to your sprints. So there you have it. We went through the entire end-to-end process of a release lifecycle for an interview scheduler product.